Our next storyteller is one of the original Moth storytellers. She went when they were having it in people's apartments, so she is hardcore. Her stories have been played on WNYC. She's also written for O Magazine, and we're thrilled to have her. Please give it up for Katherine Wessling.
So, we're in a boat. It's a little boat with an outboard motor at the back, and we're going up a river. We're heading toward a cottage in the middle of a lake in northern Ontario. This had long been a dream of mine, and I knew my life was going to change at this cottage. A few weeks before, I had been sitting in the converted utility closet that was my office, surrounded by jars of nail polish that were also poured out on paper, and I was trying to make sure the names were spelled correctly, the colors were correct, and that the prices were correct for my job, where I was a fact checker at Glamour magazine. It was far from glamorous. There was not a window anywhere to be seen. There was not one dot of natural light that reached me in that office. So when I opened my email, and I had an email from Stefan, it was like a ray of sunshine had entered into my little Dickensian world. Stefan and I had both lived in the village, and we had spent many long nights sitting by the fireplace at the old Chumleys, sitting in a booth at the corner bistro, and he would tell me the stories of his life. He painted pictures of his childhood in Toronto, of his teenage years playing hockey in the wastes of Calgary, of swimming with the sharks, literally in Australia, where he went to college, and of reading law in the hallowed halls of Cambridge University. He was like a Canadian Harry Potter. I was mesmerized. One night, as we sat in front of that fireplace at Chumley's, he took my hands and he looked deep into my eyes and he kissed me. I knew that this was the first step on our path toward marriage. I was so happy. A few weeks later, we were once again in front of that fireplace. He took my hands, he looked deep into my eyes, and he said, "I should tell you that I'm moving in with my girlfriend next weekend." I froze. But wasn't I his girl? What? I didn't know how to handle the situation, so I smiled and supported him through that relationship, through his move to Canada, where he started being the host of a TV show. But through the years, I remained infatuated with him. So when I got this email inviting me to spend my birthday weekend in this fabled cottage, I was ecstatic. This cottage, he had painted it as the most beautiful place in the world. It was a place where you had time, where you could connect with nature and with anyone you were there with, where you could center yourself and where you could be happy. So of course I said yes. I started throwing my hiking boots and my bathing suit and my plaid shirts into a suitcase. I got my ticket, I called him, I said, okay, where am I going to spend the only night we're in Toronto? I assume I'm staying with you. And he said, well, actually, I invited Pat and Jeff to come along, and they said you could stay with them the first night. I froze. But this was the place where we were going to connect with nature and with each other. We were going to have a romantic story that we could tell our grandchildren about how we met, how we connected. Somehow having Pat and Jeff there wasn't going to make it work. And then he said, oh, and my sister Kate is coming too. What? Okay, I thought, lots of rom-coms have lots of characters, and this will just be one of those kind. So we were gonna make this happen. This place is magic. We were going there, Harry Potter, on our way. So we're in Toronto, and we drive, and then we're in that little boat going up the river, all five of us. And Stefan says, by the way, I agreed to write a story for a magazine, and the photographer and his assistant are coming along tomorrow. I froze again. Okay, so now there are 2 strangers as well as the 5 of us, and how is this going to happen? And maybe I should just jump out of the boat into the river. But it was the first weekend in September, and Northern Ontario is pretty far north. It was starting to get a little cold. The water was cold. And I was committed. I was going to let the magic happen. This was going to be my love story and my birthday weekend, and it was all going to work out. So off we went. We went to the cottage, we settled in, and the next morning, as promised, up comes the boat. And there's the photographer, and there's the photographer's assistant, and there's so much equipment. And the cottage only had 1 generator. They brought like 3 or 4 more generators. So it was kind of like Times Square. There was like generator noise, there were lights, and there was a photo shoot. So here was an unpaid photo shoot. The media had come to me in the nature sanctuary in the middle of the island, in the middle of the lake in Canada. So Stefan and I were stood next to each other in the woods. And if you saw this picture, just the 2 of us shoulder to shoulder with the woods spreading all around, you'd be like, they're so cute. They are gonna have the cutest grandchildren. So great, but you would not have seen the 4 other people in the background like pointing. And Pat was a producer on a Canada morning TV show, so she was coordinating everything. And Jeff worked at he directed commercials, and he had a whole idea of the mise en scène of this thing. So this was all going around, and they were telling you how to look and how to act and where to move and how to stand. And this was not my idea of why I had come to this magical place. That afternoon, we were sitting in the cottage in the sun, and I was thinking, okay, this is it. We're gonna connect. Maybe we're gonna sing a song together. Maybe we're gonna recite poetry or have some kind of deep connection. But no, Jeff decided this was the time to talk about whether or not Francis Ford Coppola was an auteur. Stefan jumped in. He had a very strong point of view, and the 2 of them went at it. Now, I had gotten an A+ in a rhetoric class called Film Auteur in college, so I did have a few things to say on the subject, and every time I tried to say those few things, everyone spoke over me. I was not listened to. I was not being heard. This was my romantic weekend about my birthday, which no one had mentioned, in the cottage and on the island in the middle of the lake in Northern Ontario, and no one was even listening to me. And I looked at Stefan, and he was not listening to me. And he wasn't seeing me. And I realized that my dream, my fairy tale romance with him, was not going to happen. I felt the tears rise, and I just had to get out of there. I stood up and I walked into the lake, and I started swimming. I was wearing my bathing suit. I started swimming, and I swam and I swam, and the water was so cold and pure and refreshing. And I heard the sounds of loons, and I remembered my childhood where I'd grown up in the ocean, thinking I was part dolphin. And I felt connected. And I looked up, and there were these beautiful woods on either side. And there was this beautiful blue Canadian sky. And I swam, and I was happy. And then I heard this. I stopped, I looked around. There was a boat coming from the cottage. It was the photographer and his assistant. Oh my God, are they gonna take a picture of me in my bathing suit? No, please, please no. But as they got closer, I saw they didn't have any equipment with them. Are you okay? The photographer asked. Yeah, I said, why? And he said, well, you just stood up and walked into the lake, and it is kind of cold, and you've been gone almost an hour. We were all worried about you, so we were sent to make sure you were okay. Oh, I said, oh. Well, I love the water. I feel at home in the water, and I feel connected in the water, and he looked at me and he said, I know what you're talking about. You do? I asked. He said, yeah. Do you want to ride back? No. No, I said, I'll swim. He said, well, you better hurry up because, spoiler alert, someone's getting a birthday party back on shore. And off they went. I watched them go into the distance, and I thought, I'm getting my birthday party. And here I am in one of the most beautiful places in the world, in the water, swimming back toward that cottage on the island in the middle of the lake in northern Ontario, toward my friends who had all come to the island in the middle of the lake in northern Ontario, except for the photographer and his assistant. And they were all there for me, to help me celebrate my birthday. And I realized that my dreams had come true, and I was gonna go eat some cake.
Comes the